Hello friends, I'm George, the nice smelling gentleman. Welcome back to the channel guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. Today I'm going to review 3 scents from Fragrance World. The first one is called Suits and it's pretty well known clone of YSL Tuxedo, and the other two are part of a line that's called Olfactory, and one of them is called Music Fest. This one is a clone of Maison Margiela's Jazz Club, and the other one is called Bonfire, and this is a clone of Maison Margiela's By the Fireplace. The first fragrance that I'm going to talk about will be Suits from Fragrance World. The fragrance comes packaged in this white colored box with some silver and black accents. On the front you get the name of the fragrance, the name of the company, the concentration EDP, the bottle size 100 milliliters. On the back you get and top you get some additional information, a sticker of authenticity, and then on the bottom there's a production date which is April of 2024. And once you take out the bottle, this is how it looks. It has a pretty similar look to the original fragrance, although this is a little bit wider. And it has a plastic cap that's a snug fit all around. The packaging is pretty decent and close to the original. I'll show you the spray in action. The spray is actually pretty decent. And then let's talk about a little bit about the scent of Suits. As I said in the beginning of the video, this fragrance is a clone or very heavily inspired by YSL Tuxedo, and it carries a very similar scent to the original fragrance. If you are familiar with the original, you'll immediately pick up what Suits is trying to be. It opens up very similar to the original fragrance with lots of spices, a hint of the rose, quite a bit of the vanillic sweetness, but compared to the original fragrance, this lacks a little bit of the sharpness of the spices that you get out of the original, and the spices all around feel of a slightly lower quality compared to the original scent, which of course is to be expected. On the dry down, this becomes sweeter, it becomes more mellow, the vanilla note starts to get a lot more prominent, maybe there's a hint of something like ambery sweetness as well on the dry down. It has a bit of a floral touch, that violet leaf note is quite strong with this fragrance. On the dry down, the rose becomes a little bit more prominent, the patchouli becomes very strong like the original scent. It's one of the signature notes in the original and in this fragrance, and all around again pretty similar to the original fragrance, but just feels a little bit more floral, a little bit more rosy, and definitely feels quite a bit sweeter compared to the original scent. All around it carries a very enjoyable, very masculine and quite a classic scent profile in my opinion. Brings a bit of an old school vibes, a little bit of a barbershoppy vibes with this fragrance whenever I smell this, and all of the Tuxedo clones and the original Tuxedo. For me it definitely carries a little bit of a classic vibe. When it comes to how similar this fragrance is to the original, as I said, very similar, especially in the air, very similar, but up close there are a few minor differences. This doesn't feel as spicy and as sharp as the original fragrance feels in the opening. Has a little bit more of a floral touch compared to the original scent, has a little bit stronger rose note, and on the dry down this is definitely sweeter compared to the original scent, and of course feels of lesser quality. Again, it's to be expected because this costs about a tenth of the price of the original scent, but nonetheless it will get you quite similar, quite decently close to the original fragrance. When it comes to performance, it's one area where at least my bottle has been a little bit disappointing. I've been getting about 6.5 hours of performance out of this fragrance, which is a little bit disappointing because the other clones of Tuxedo that I have in my collection actually outperform Suits. Projection wise, it will project nicely for about an hour and a half, so it's not a bad performer, but I had slightly higher expectations. The price of this one, I paid about 22-23 euros, which again at that price point I think it's a pretty decent deal, considering that it will get you decently close to the original fragrance and costs about a tenth of the price. And now moving on to the two Maison Margiela clones. The first one that I'm going to show you is called Music Fest. This one is cloning Jazz Club from Maison Margiela. The fragrance comes packaged in this white colored box with some silver red and black accents. On the front you got the name of the fragrance, you get the bottle size 100 milliliters, the concentration, EDP. On the side there's a production date which is May of 2024, some additional Fragrance World branding. On the back you get this photo of a guitar player, and that's all around for the actual box design. And once you take out the bottle, this is how the bottle looks. Now bottle wise it's somewhat similar to the original fragrance, also looks without the cap. This bottle looks pretty similar to a Mancero bottle as well. You get a very cheap filling plastic cap that's somewhat of a snug fit. Again, on the front you get some additional information. All around the packaging again is corresponding to the price point. I'll show the sprayer in action and then I'll quickly talk about the scent of Music Fest. The sprayer is actually pretty decent. And now onto the scent of Music Fest. It opens up with a hint of spiciness, a hint of freshness. The neroli and the lemon note add a bit of freshness in the opening. That peppery note is definitely there, but it's just a hint of that one. And this opens up quite boozy from that rum note that it has. You also get quite a lot of the vanillic sweetness, and you get some of the warmth from that tobacco note that this fragrance has. It's a nice, easy to wear, opening. The more this starts to go into the dry down, the more you lose all of that spiciness and that freshness from the opening, and the dry down is pretty much a mix of the rum, the vanillic sweetness, and the tobacco note. It's a pretty simplistic scent. It doesn't change very much because in the opening you don't have that much spiciness or freshness. And all around it's an easy to wear, warm tobacco based fragrance. The dry down is really warm, slightly boozy, and quite sweet as well. It's nicely blended, it's very sweet, and it's actually quite enjoyable to wear. When it comes to how close this fragrance is to the original scent, I would say that this feels a little bit less spicy, a little bit less fresh in the opening, and on the dry down feels quite a bit sweeter, at least in my opinion, compared to Jazz Club from Maison Margiela. It's definitely close to the original scent, but I wouldn't call it a one-to-one clone, maybe more like a twist compared to the original fragrance. Definitely carries very similar vibes, but again I just think it's a little bit sweeter compared to the original fragrance. When it comes to performance, Music Fest has been a decent performer. Just like with Suits, I've been getting about 6.5 hours of performance out of this fragrance, which is not bad. The original fragrance has also never been known as being a great performer, so this matches the original, maybe even outperforms the original fragrance a little bit. But where this lacks, in my opinion, is the projection. This is more of an intimate type of scent. Initially, when you first spray it, you'll get a big blast of that sweetness and the tobacco and the rum, and you may think that this is going to be a strong fragrance, but the reality is that pretty soon, maybe about 1 hour after spraying this one, it starts to become more of a skin scent. So total performance, total longevity, 6.5 hours with a decent moderate projection for about 1 hour. Price tag about 25 euros, which again makes it a fraction of the price of the original fragrance, and this has a 100 milliliter bottle size. And moving on to the last fragrance featured in today's video, which is called Bonfire. Again, a clone of Maison Margiela fragrance, in this case By the Fireplace. Very similar packaging to the other fragrance that I just showed you. When it comes to the back, you get a different photo here of like some people sitting across a fire, which is as the name would suggest. And then again, very similar bottle design, in fact exactly the same bottle design with exactly the same things. EDP concentration 100 milliliters when it comes to the actual bottle. I'll show you the sprayer of Bonfire in action, and then I'll talk about the scent of this one. Another very good sprayer. And now onto the scent of Bonfire. As I said in the beginning of the video, this fragrance is a clone or very heavily inspired by Maison Margiela's By the Fireplace, and definitely carries a very strong similarity to the original fragrance. It opens up very smoky with a hint of spiciness, something like saffron spiciness. You immediately get quite a lot of woodiness out of this fragrance. There's a guaiac note in this one, and you also immediately get quite a bit of a sugary sweetness. The sweetness feels like a burnt sugary type of sweetness, maybe that's why they call it a caramel note. But the main players in the opening are that very strong, incense note, very strong smoky note, and the sugary sweetness with a hint of spiciness. When I first got this fragrance about a month and a half ago, it actually used to be a lot stronger on the incense note, on the smoky note, and it was pretty overwhelming. But fast forward about a month and a half later, and now this is started to settle down nicely, and in the opening you actually pick up quite a lot more sweetness compared to when I first got it. When this goes into the actual dry down, the spiciness is completely gone away. The strength of that incense note is also gone quite a lot. It's still there, but it plays more of a support role on the dry down. And the dry down is more about the mix of the sweet notes like that burnt sugar note, the vanilla note, and the amber note, with quite a lot of gaiac wood woodsiness on the dry down. All around a very cozy, very smoky, very sweet and woodsy scent profile that I absolutely love. I love the original fragrance, I love Amir Al Oud Intense from Lattafa as well, and I also really like and love Bonfire from Fragrance World. When it comes to how close this fragrance is to the original scent, I would say it's very similar, but it feels just a little bit more smoky in the opening compared to the original one. Other than that, very similar. When it comes to performance, this is the best performing out of the three that I'm talking about in today's video. I've been getting about 7.5 up to 8 hours of performance, with pretty strong projection in the first hour and a half, maybe even up to 2 hours. Price wise, it's pretty similar to the other Mesa Margiela clone that I showed you, being priced at somewhere around about the €25 mark, again making it a pretty decent deal because it costs a fraction of the price of the original scent. And at the end, a few final words about the three fragrances that are featured in today's video. When it comes to suits from Fragrance World, this is a nice interpretation of YSL Tuxedo. Scent-wise, pretty similar to the original scent, with a few minor twists. This feels a little bit more floral, a little bit less spicy, and a little bit sweeter on the dry down, and that may make it a little bit more wearable for some people out there, me including. Other than that, very similar to the original scent, carries a very similar scent profile, carries very similar vibes, masculine, old school vibes, a bit of a dressed up scent. All around, not a bad clone. Although I think that the Tux from Maison Alhambra is closer to the original scent. Suits on its own is not a bad scent. The only problem that I find with this fragrance is the fact that it lacks a little bit of, when it comes to performance, at least in my particular bottle. And when it comes to the two Mesa Margiela clones, Music Fest is a nice clone of a Jazz Club from Mesa Margiela, although this feels a little bit sweeter, maybe making it a little bit more unisex compared to the original, which leans a little bit to the masculine side in my opinion. Good decent performance, maybe again a little bit of a letdown when it comes to the performance. I would have loved it if it performed a little bit better, but scent-wise pretty decent quality, decently close to the original scent, and all around not a bad scent. And then the last one, Bonfire, is probably my most favorite out of the three fragrances. Very similar to the original scent, maybe a little bit more smoky compared to the original one, but other than that, very similar, very nice woodsy, smoky and sweet scent profile that's very cozy, and it's the best performer out of the three fragrances. And all around, this is my most favorite out of the three that I showed you today. And so guys, in today's video I reviewed 3 scents from Fragrance World: Suits, and then these two, Music Fest and Bonfire. I hope that you found this video interesting or entertaining. If you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in the next one. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.